other day I posted on my Instagram with some pictures of this top that I made, and I got a lot of comments like, what pattern did you use for this? Where can I find the pattern for this? There is no pattern. I just freehanded it like I do a lot of my crochet garments, and it's a fairly simple make, so I decided like a pattern wouldn't really be, I don't know, it seems like overkill to me. I think I can probably explain it to you through a video. So that's what I'm gonna be doing today. A little tutorial for this top-down raglan style cardigan with buttons. For yarn, everyone also was commenting on this yarn. I'm in love with this yarn. I got it from Darn It Anyway in Stillwater, Minnesota, my favorite yarn shop. And it is the Sirdar jewel spun. And I don't remember what colorway this one was, but this is Daybreak Delta. For my size, like a small medium, I used about 200 grams, I had a little bit left over, or approximately 500 meters, 546 yards. So I will always buy more yarn when I'm making a garment to make sure that I don't run out of it, and make sure that it's the same dye lot, of course. But I think just for like this pattern or this tutorial, I personally love like the variegated look. You can do this with like a solid colored yarn, that would also be cute, but I just really like the way it feels more unique. Otherwise it's just like, you know, a top-down cardigan that you know, lovely, but I feel like this looks a little more unique with the really cool colors. So if you can find a variegated yarn, that's what I would recommend. You could use probably like a 2 or 3 DK, something similar, and it would probably work just as good. Then I'm going to be using a 6mm hook. I personally like to use this as like a layering piece, so it doesn't have to be completely full coverage. So a bigger hook for me is the way I like mine to look. And then you're going to need 4 stitch markers to mark the increases of the top down on the shoulders, and some scissors, and then like a darning needle or however you want to weave in your ends. All right, just gonna find a middle pull because I have to have a middle pull. Not bad, that's actually not bad. Okay, I'm gonna make a slip knot. In terms of sizing, you're gonna just have to estimate how you want it to fit as far as chains and stuff. I'm gonna start with chaining about 55 and see how that looks on me. Okay, so this is 50 and that's not quite long enough. I think I'm gonna do about 60. Okay, let me just, okay. And then I'm gonna try this on around my neck. So it for sure has to be able to go around your head because it's gonna be your neckline. But you also want it to like kind of sit comfortably here on your neckline. And I happen to be wearing like a t-shirt that fits me pretty much how I want my crochet top to fit me, which works out really well. But basically this lines up very well with my existing neckline that I know this top already fits me. So you just want it to fit comfortably around your neck. You don't want it to be too tight, but just figure out how you want it to fit. I chain 60 for about a small medium. Now that we've got our foundation chain, I'm going to start marking my increases. For this fit, I want it to be tight in the arms, but kind of looser around my midsection. I will be doing 80-20. So I'll explain to you what that means, or what I mean by that. Okay, this is the foundation chain that I just made, and I'm laying it out. So this is the front, these are the shoulders, this is the back. I have a total of 60 stitches for my foundation chain. I need to take 80% of 60. That gives me 48 stitches. That means for the front and back, I have 48 stitches. If I cut that in half, that's 24 on the back side, 24 on the front side. Now, since the front is split into 2 pieces, half of that is 12. 12 stitches here, 12 stitches here, 24 stitches in the back. So 80% for the front and back. That leaves us with 20% for the shoulders. So 20% of my total stitches, 20% of 60 is 12. So 6 stitches for each shoulder. Okay, now that we have our foundation chain and all of our increases marked with stitch markers, we're going to chain 2 because the rest of the time we'll be working in double crochets. So 3rd chain from the hook, you're going to place a double crochet and then continue to double crochet until you reach your 1st stitch marker. Okay, so I've reached my 1st stitch marker. If you have never done a top down before, you're just going to be increasing at every stitch marker, which is like front and backs of your shoulders. Into this stitch marker, I'm going to place a double crochet, a chain 1, and then another double crochet into that same stitch so that you get this little increase. Now I'm going to continue to double crochet until I get to my next stitch marker. Okay, we're at my next stitch marker. I'm going to double crochet, chain 1, double crochet. And that's what the next increase looks like. Now I'm going to double crochet across my back until I get to my 3rd stitch marker. Okay, I'm on my 3rd stitch marker. I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to put an increase, which is double crochet, chain 1, double crochet. Now I'm going to double crochet to my next stitch marker and into my last stitch marker, do an increase, double crochet, chain 1, double crochet. And then double crochet to the end of my row. Now I reached the end of my row, and I'll just show you kind of the layout of it. So this is the front, this is the button area, this is the back, and these are the shoulders. And you're going to keep increasing in the front of the back and the shoulders to make the top down look. Now for my next row, I'm going to chain 2, and that does not count as a stitch. I'm going to turn my work, and then I'm going to do the exact same thing that I did in the first row for every row up until our sleeves, and I'll show you what that means. So I'm going to double crochet until my first chain space. We're going to be working into the chain space now. So into this space, we're going to do a double crochet, chain 1, double crochet. I'm going to go around. Every time I come to another chain space that I made in the first row, I'm going to make an increase. Now you're going to continue doing the same pattern for each row with double crochets, increase in each of the corners, and then chain 2 and do it all over again. I think I'm going to do about 8 rows. I'm going to stop when you try it on and these corners are about at your armpits or however you want it to fit. So I will show you what I mean by that. Okay, I've just finished my 4th row and I just want to try it on and show you eventually what you're kind of looking for or what it should be looking like at this stage. So here's the front, and then here are the increases you've been making. What you're looking for is you're going to keep doing regular increase rows until this corner reaches your armpit. So I think I'm probably going to do like 4 more, maybe 8 total, but this will vary for like each person or different size and that kind of thing. All right, I just finished the 7th row of my increases, and I'm just gonna try it on to see where I'm at. Ooh, I love this yarn. This is my new favorite yarn. So this is how it's fitting so far. Here's my neckline. Here are the initial stitch markers where we did our first increases, and this is gonna remain straight down. I think I'm gonna do just one more row. I'm gonna say that is the right length for me. My corners are hitting like right at my armpits, which is where I want it to be. Next row, we are gonna shape our sleeves. Okay, so for the next row, I chain 2, I turn my work. Now I'm going to double crochet like normal until I get to my chain space. I am 1 stitch away from my chain space. So what I like to do, just so that this space doesn't end up looking funny when it's, you know, worn, I'm going to basically do a decrease and connect this last stitch with the chain space. So I'm going to yarn over, insert, yarn over, and pull up. So now I have 2 loops on my hook, and then I'm going to insert into the chain space, yarn over, and pull up another loop. So now I have 3, yarn over, pull through 3 loops, yarn over, pull through 2. So now what I've done is just connect this last stitch with the chain space, so there's not a weird gap there. I'm gonna try it back on, and what we're going to be measuring now is underneath your armpit from this back increase to the front increase right here. So from here to here. So for me, that is about 15 centimeters. So now that I've measured the space under my armpit, you're gonna connect these two. I'm now going to chain until I reach my measurement. I think 12. Yeah, 12 is about good for me. So I chained 12. Now you're going to find your other chain space, and that's where you will be working into next. So we skipped this whole shoulder section, and we're going to be working into this next chain space. You're going to yarn over and then do a decrease into this chain space and the next stitch. Now you're going to do regular double crochets across the back until you reach the stitch before your next chain space. Okay, now I've reached the stitch before my next chain space. I'm going to decrease from this stitch into the chain space just to close it up, and now I'm going to chain the same amount I did on the last sleeve, which was 12. Okay, I've chained 12, which is the space under my armpit. Now I'm going to skip the entire shoulder, go to the next chain space, and then do a decrease from that chain space into the next stitch. And now I'm going to double crochet like normal all the way until the end of the row. So what you have now is just the same thing you had before, but now you have under your armpits. So I'm gonna quick try this on. With it on now, I have this chain going under my armpit to the other side. So it's all starting to take shape. I am not sponsored or anything. I swear, I'm just in love with this yarn. Now for the rest of the body, you're just gonna do regular double crochets back and forth I'm gonna chain 2, turn my work, and then double crochet. So just a plain row of double crochets will look like this. I'm gonna continue to do double crochet rows back and forth until I've reached the length that I want it to be. So the first one I made was pretty much full length, like slightly cropped, I guess, but it's totally up to you how long you want to make it. Just keep in mind that we are going to do a little ribbed portion around the entire thing, but it's very small, so. This is what mine is looking like at 14 rows. This part unraveled a little bit because I was trying to take a video and put it on, but this is 14 rows for me. I don't want it like exactly full length, so I think I'm gonna keep it at this where it's like a tiny bit cropped. Now that we have the length that we want with the body portion, the next thing we're gonna do is place our stitch markers for where our buttons are gonna go. So I laid out my top with where I left off right here on the bottom left corner. You can choose as many buttons as you want. I'm gonna be placing 5 just based on the length of my top. So first I'm going to place stitch markers in the last row and the top row, because I know for sure I'll want buttons on the top and bottom. And then I'm going to count how many rows I have in between. So I have 20 rows in between my top and bottom rows, and I'm going to divide that by 4 since there's going to be 3 buttons in here and then 4 spaces. So 20 rows divided by 4 is 5. So from the bottom, I'm going to count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Place a stitch marker.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then I should have 1, 2, 3,
4, 5. So if it's not quite even, you can always use like a measuring tape and try to do it that way. It doesn't have to be perfect, and the numbers don't have to divide perfectly, just as long as you have them pretty evenly spaced, or just looking however you want them. So I have my stitch markers for my buttons, and now I'm going to put my hook back in and begin the ribbing up the side. I'm gonna turn my work sideways because now I'm going to be working up this way. I'm going to start with a chain 3. Now, just to explain kind of an overview of how this is going to look, the ribbing is going to go back and forth up the top. So what we're going to be doing is single crochet in the back loop of each stitch and then slip stitch into the side of the double crochet row. So I'll show you what I mean by that. So we have chain 3. I'm going to place a single crochet in the second chain from the hook, and then another single crochet in the next. And now we come up to my double crochet row. I'm going to slip stitch and then slip stitch again. So 2 slip stitches into the side of this double crochet row. So this is what it looks like. And now, since we have a stitch marker here for my button, I'm going to show you how to do that. So I turn. Now, normally I would do a single crochet into the back loops of these stitches. And instead of doing that, we're going to make a buttonhole. And then I'm going to chain 1, skip this stitch, and then back loop single crochet into the last stitch. So depending on the size of your buttons, I have pretty regular sized buttons, but you might want to check to make sure this hole is big enough for your buttons. You might have to chain 2, you might have to adjust the size of your ribbing, but this is a good size hole for the button that I'm using. these are the buttons that I'm going to be using, and then I'm just going to make sure that the hole that I'm making is big enough for the button to come through, but also not too big where it could just like slip back through. So now I'm going to chain 1 and turn, and then continue doing the ribbing. So if this is my stitch, this is the front loop and this is the back loop, and instead of picking them both up like normal, I'm just picking up the back loop. So this one. And then I'm going to slip stitch. And as far as which loops to pick up for your slip stitches in the side of the double crochets, it's really just up to you. I usually just choose the ones that are most on the outside, which doesn't sound very scientific, but I don't know. You just choose how you'd like it to be. So I just did my 2 slip stitches into the side of my double crochet row. Now I'm going to turn. Now I'm going to do my single crochets into the back loops of that row. Chain 1, turn again, single crochet into the back loops, and then slip stitch 2 into the side of my double crochet row. Now I'm going to continue this ribbing pattern until I hit my next stitch marker, which then I will make another buttonhole. Okay, so I'm just doing my 2 slip stitches into the side of this row, and I've come to my second stitch marker, so I'm gonna make another buttonhole. I just did 2 slip stitches into the side of this row. Now I'm gonna turn, and now instead of doing my back loop only single crochets, I'm gonna chain 1, skip this stitch, and single crochet into the back loop of the last stitch. The back loop can be kind of hard to find on those last stitches sometimes, but it's a little tricky, but you'll find it. And then chain 1 and do it all up until my next stitch marker. Okay, so I'm doing my last buttonhole. I have the ribbing done on the buttonhole side. And then where each of these stitch markers is, there should be little buttonholes. All right, now we're gonna do the ribbing around the top and then go back down the other side. So I ended with my buttonhole. I just did my buttonhole here. And now I'm going to chain 3. And now I'm going to turn my work again. Now I'm going to be working around the top. So with my chain 3, I'm just going to take out my stitch markers from my neckline so that it doesn't confuse me. All right, now you're gonna do the ribbing pattern that we just did all the way around the neckline, except you won't make any buttonholes, obviously. So here we go. So single crochet, second chain from the hook. And then we're gonna place slip stitch and another slip stitch. into this row, turn, and now instead of going into the sides of the double crochets, you'll just be using your actual stitches. Okay, so I've just finished the last row here where I have no more stitches. Now we are going to make 2 rows so that it matches up with this inside ribbing. So like we did on the other side, how the top ribbing sticks out and the side ribbing starts here, that's what we're gonna do kind of in reverse. So you chain 1 and then single crochet into the back loops like you normally do. Now instead of doing our slip stitches, you're just going to chain 1 again, turn, single crochet into the back loops, chain 1, turn, single crochet into the back loops. So now if you notice, I have actually 3 extra rows here because the number of rows I had here was odd. So it'll depend on how many stitches you have around your neckline. You might only have to do an up and back 2 rows, but I had to do 3 in order to end on this side, if that makes sense. So I'm gonna turn my work again. Now I'm gonna be working back down the side. So I'm gonna chain 1. Now since I have 3 rows here, I'm just gonna kind of condense it and just put 2 single crochets. So you want to single crochet 2, and then slip stitch 2 into the side of this double crochet row. And then turn and continue to do my ribbing all the way down the side. Okay, so I'm doing my 2 slip stitches into my last double crochet row, turn, single crochet in the back loops. Now we're gonna do, so on the other side, how we did it all the way down. Depending on how many rows you have, an even or odd number, you might have to do an extra row just so you get to the bottom. Now we're going to be working around the bottom. So I'm going to turn my work again. I'm going to chain 3 and do my ribbing around the bottom. Okay, so I'm coming up on my last row, doing my single crochets, and then depending on how many stitches you had around the bottom, if you had an even or odd number, I just have 1 stitch left, so I'm gonna just slip stitch that and then tie off. But if you had another stitch to do, you would just end on this corner instead, if that makes sense. So, gonna fasten off. And now the ribbing around your body portion is done. Okay, this is how she's looking right now. We did the ribbing along the body portion and the buttonholes. Now we're gonna work on the sleeves. Okay, so I'm gonna take one of our sleeves. You can really attach your yarn wherever you want, but I like to attach it on the bottom so that it's harder to spot when you have it on. We're gonna start double crochet row around the sleeve hole. So I'm gonna chain 2. For me, it doesn't count as a stitch, so I'm gonna double crochet in the same stitch and then double crochet all the way around. And I like to tuck the tail in just because I get really annoyed with how many ends I have to weave in. And I just am like pretty lazy about it. When you get to this side row that has this one double crochet row, you're gonna put 2 double crochets into the side of this row. And then go around the top of the sleeve. And then I slip stitch to the first double crochet. And then I know for sure I'm gonna want like 2 or 3 rows of sleeve, I think. But it's just gonna be up to you and how long you want your sleeve. If you want like a little cap sleeve, maybe just 1 row. If you want it long sleeve, you're gonna need some more yarn, but you can do that. But I think I'm gonna do probably 3 rows. So I'm gonna chain 2 and do some more double crochet rows. Okay, so I just finished my 3rd row of double crochets, and I think that's how long I want my sleeve to be. Definitely keep trying yours on to make sure it's how long you want it, and 3 rows is enough for me. So now we're gonna do the ribbing around the outside of the sleeve, and it's the exact same ribbing that you just did around the body. So you're gonna chain 3, single crochet in the second chain from the hook, single crochet, and then slip stitch the next 2 stitches, turn, and then you're gonna do that all the way around until you get back to the beginning. Right, and I just got back around to my beginning chain 3. So here I'm gonna put the right sides together and then slip stitch these 2 stitches and join them together. And then you go ahead and fasten up. And then I go to the other sleeve, tie on, and you're going to repeat exactly what you did for the other sleeve on this sleeve. All right, so if you lay it out, we already marked the buttonholes on the left side with these stitch markers. So what we're gonna do is transfer these over to the other side. Okay, so now I have where my buttons go marked, and I'm gonna get out my buttons. Alright, so it's completely up to you what color thread you're gonna use for the buttons. I'm just gonna use this cream colored one because I don't know, it's a neutral color that I like. Cut a piece of thread, thread your needle. I am also no expert in button sewing or really any type of hand sewing. And this is the button I'm using. Now I'm gonna kind of place it about where I want it to be. On the back side, I'm going to tie on my thread. So I tied onto the back, and now I'm gonna set my button where I want it, and then go through the back to the front through a buttonhole. So I'm gonna cross over the center, go back down through the buttonhole, and then come back up and then I'm just gonna do that a couple more times. So then I'm gonna come up through the back, but don't go through any hole, just kind of like go sideways. And then wrap the string around the button like 4 or 5 times, just to create that like looseness. And then go back down and then tie off on the back. All right, that is the end. After you've done your buttons, go ahead and weave in your ends, and then you are all done with your funky top-down cardigan. Please, if you make one of these, tag me and show me. I want to see them so badly. I'm so excited. I do have some more ideas for videos. If you have any ideas, go ahead and comment them, but I'm pretty excited for future videos and what I have planned. So please subscribe if you like this content and want to see more. Bye.